The second round of dialogue between Colombia's government and the National Liberation Army begins in Mexico. In Turkey and Syria, death toll climbed to 36,000 1 week after the 7.8 magnitude earthquake that hit the two countries. Russian intelligence services report that the United States is actively recruiting insurgents linked to ISIS and Al-Qaeda to attack Russian territory. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. The second cycle of the peace talks between the government of Colombia and the National Liberation Army started on Monday in Mexico. The talks will address issues such as the bilateral ceasefire and the incorporation of civil society in the construction of total peace. Both sides will also analyze the results of the first report of the humanitarian caravan, which will allow for the effective implementation of humanitarian relief for communities affected by the armed conflict. The new formal cycle of negotiations was reactivated only 3 months after Colombia's president, Gustavo Petro, took office in August, and under his policy of total peace, the delegations held a first round of dialogues between November and December in Caracas. In a statement, Colombia's High Commissioner for Peace thanked the hospitality of Mexico, who served as a guarantor country together with Venezuela, Chile, Norway, and more recently, Brazil, adding that Sweden, Germany, Switzerland, and Spain would assist the peace talks table as accompanying countries in this second cycle. Argentinian President Alberto Fernandez appointed the director of the Federal Intelligence Agency, Agustin Rossi, as the new head of cabinet. An official statement from the Casa Rosada announced the replacement of the current head of cabinet, Juan Mansur, effective February 15th. In his place, the government designated Agustin Rossi, who served as director of the Federal Intelligence Agency since June 2022. In the statement, President Fernandez extended his gratitude to Mansur for his work and his political and personal commitment during his tenure since 2021. In Peru, while police crackdown on social protests continued over the weekend, a multitude bade its last farewell to Denison Uaraca Vilches, the 22-year-old young man murdered last Friday by police forces during demonstrations in Apurimac. At the funeral accompanied by traditional indigenous songs, his brother stated Denison was a young man who gave his life for his country and demanded justice for him and the dozens of Peruvians killed for raising against Boluarte's government.
My younger brother left his house walking in search of justice, in search of democracy, if there was any in this country. He gave his life for his people, for his country. But it is not, as they say, that one more vandal has died. All the people know who Denison Uaraca Vilches was, a young man full of energy, a young man who loved his people, who loved his friends and his family. Today he leaves us. I want to ask all the people that justice be done for this death and those of our other brothers who have also died in this unjust struggle. Unjust because of the authorities who repress us, but they have died defending their rights.
The Colombian airline Satena will have 2 new flight routes to Venezuela, according to an announcement made on Sunday by the President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, on his Twitter account. The President indicated in his message that the airline will start its new operations to Venezuela as from March 3rd and that there will be other international destinations coming soon. The message details that Satena will fly Tuesdays and Fridays to Caracas, the Venezuelan capital, and tickets will be priced at $256. The state airline Satena, which belongs to the Colombian Air Force, joins Turkiye Airline in the exchange of passengers between Venezuela and Colombia after flights between both countries were reactivated. In Honduras, the President of Congress, Luis Redondo, summoned the leaders of the different political factions in view of the failure of negotiations to renew the members of the Supreme Court of Justice. The President of the Congress, Luis Redondo, issued a communique in which he summons the heads of the political factions to dialogue in order to reach an agreement. Last Saturday, the deputies concluded a debate without finalizing the election of the 15 members of the highest court of justice of the country for the period 2023-2030. In this context, the magistrate of the court, Edgardo Cáceres, announced that he will present his irrevocable resignation to the position after concluding his 7-year term. Ecuadorian President Guillermo Lasso did not appear before the national parliament on Monday to account for his alleged connection to a corruption scheme in public companies involving his brother-in-law, Danilo Carrera. The president had been summoned on Monday by the specialized commission which investigates the so-called Encuentro case regarding the alleged corruption scheme. The president of the commission, Viviana Veloz, indicated that the head of state sent a letter in which he apologized for not attending due to agenda issues. Veloz stated that the president's appearance was important for the population, for which she claimed that Lasso's action only seeks to guarantee impunity and protect Danilo's career, thus obstructing the work of the commission. Brazil's former president Jair Bolsonaro says he will return to Brazil in the coming weeks because, in his words, his mission on Earth is not over yet. The statement was made to a local media outlet in the U.S. state of Florida on Sunday, where the former head of state is staying since December 30th, 2 days before his successor, Luiz Inácio da Silva, took office as president of Brazil. In the statement, Bolsonaro did not make any reference to the attack perpetrated on January 8th by his supporters on the headquarters of the three branches of government in Brasilia, from which he timidly has dissociated himself. The former president is waiting for a visa change requested in January to stay longer in the United States. Wildfires in Chile decreased by 19%, but the government warns that eventual return of high temperatures. Chile's Undersecretary of the Interior, Manuel Monsalve, said that the weather window, which has brought a decrease in temperatures and even rainfall in part of the southern part of the country, has helped reduce the number of fire outbreaks from 98 on Saturday to 79 on Sunday, for a 19.3% decrease. However, the government official urged not to drop guard, since temperatures would rise again as from Monday, reaching again more than 30 degrees Celsius on Wednesday or Thursday this week. So far, the blazes have damaged over 420,000 hectares of forest, destroyed more than 1,400 houses, and affected almost 6,000 people, 350 of which have been sheltered. Let's take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at the account at teleSUR English, in which you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. All the stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the south. In Turkey and Syria, the human losses are estimated at 36,000 after the 7.8 magnitude earthquake that affected the two countries. The United Nations organization indicates that the final death toll could reach 50,000. According to the latest figures, the death toll in Turkey reached 29,605, while the number of injured exceeded 80,000. The Syrian Ministry of Health, on the other hand, reports a total of 1,387 dead and 2,326 injured. In total, the death toll between the two countries is above 36,000 people. The United Nations Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Martin Griffiths, expressed his concern that the number of dead might exceed 50,000 as the search for the missing continues. Groups of firefighters and SAR dogs guides continue the search and rescue operations in the Turkish city of Adıyaman, one of the most affected by the earthquakes registered in the country a week ago. The rescue group continues to work in coordination with international teams in the hope of finding more survivors from under the rubble of more than 3,000 infrastructures that collapsed as a consequence of the earthquakes that hit the nation. According to local authorities, there is still no final number of fatalities from the quake in the city. However, more than 4,000 might have died in Adıyaman alone. At least 1,000 people have been rescued and more than 50,000 have been affected. Adıyaman is the third most affected city in the country by the 7.8 magnitude earthquake registered in the country.
The city of Adıyaman was one of the most affected ones. We have a large number of damaged buildings, and many of them are no longer in living conditions, and we have to demolish them. Now we are providing food to all people that need it, and we are also working to provide housing for them.
The United Nations regretted on Sunday the delays in the arrival of humanitarian aid to northwest Syria following the devastating earthquake that hit the country a week ago. The international organization called for more support for the millions of people who lost their homes and admitted that it has failed them. Aid has been trickling into Syria, whose health system and infrastructure have already been battered by more than a decade of war. The sanctions applied by the United States to Damascus hindered the arrival of humanitarian aid to the Arab nation, including a rescue team with a shipment sent by the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. United Nations representatives met this Saturday with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, who expressed his willingness to open new access points for humanitarian aid. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees reports that an estimated 5.3 million people have been displaced in Syria after last week's earthquake. Syria was hit by a 5.4 earthquake on February 6, which caused the collapse of multiple buildings in the north part of the country. The international organization said there were already around 6.8 million people displaced by the conflict in the Arab nation before the earthquake. The Secretary of the United Nations Organization for Humanitarian Affairs, Martin Griffiths, commented that Syria has not received even half of the support it should have. Israeli warplanes bombarded several cities in the Gaza Strip early Monday morning. In addition, the Israeli artillery fired 3 shells west of the town of Beit Hanun, north of the Strip. However, so far no casualties have been reported. The Israeli army claimed that the airstrikes targeted a subway rocket manufacturing complex run by Hamas, the militant group that rules Gaza. This exchange of fire comes amid a major escalation of violence in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which has left more than 50 dead so far this year alone, the vast majority of them Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. And mourners gathered around the body of Amir al-Bustami, 21 years old, inside the morgue of Nablus hospital after he was killed in a pre-dawn Israeli army raid in Nablus, northern West Bank. A large Israeli unit stormed the city's run civilian building on Sufyan Street amid heavy gunfire, reports Palestinian news agency Wafa. Ahmad Jibril, head of the emergency and ambulance department of the Palestinian Red Crescent, said 5 were wounded with live bullets and 1 with a rubber-coated steel bullet. With the killing of al-Bustami, the number of Palestinians killed by Israeli forces since the beginning of 2023 rose to 48, including 10 children, a 61-year-old woman, and a prisoner inside Israeli jails. Thousands of Israelis protested Monday against a government's plan that could weaken the nation's judiciary. Demonstrators gathered in front of the nation's parliament with Israeli flags and signs with messages such as "There is no democracy without equality" and "Destroying the country to avoid trial," include reference to the perception that Prime Minister Netanyahu's desire to halt his corruption trials might be behind his government's planned judicial reforms. Palestinian LGBTQ rainbow flags were also seen among the crowd. Despite the protests and a plea from President Isaac Herzog on Sunday not to start the legislative process, the government proceeded as planned with the introduction of the bill in Parliament on Monday. The Arab League and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, condemned in Egypt the Israeli government's decision to regularize new settlements in the occupied territory of West Bank. The 22-member league said in a statement that the new measures reflect the extreme character of Benjamin Netanyahu's government, which threatens to inflame the situation in the occupied territories and the regional stability. On the other hand, the 57-member OIC denounced that Israel's settlement policy violates international resolutions and undermines the two-state solution to the Middle East conflict. Israel announced Sunday the regularization of 9 new settlements in the occupied West Bank without a state permit and said it will approve it in the coming days, the construction of new housing in the existing colonies. More news coming up after a final short break, so don't go away. Welcome back from the South. In Russia, the intelligence service reported that the United States is actively recruiting insurgents linked to ISIS and Al-Qaeda to attack Russian territory. According to official reports from the agency, the U.S. military mainly selects fighters from the Caucasus and Central Asia region and then carries out recruitment from the Al-Tanf military base in Syria. According to the Community of Independent States, Washington's troops have already added to their ranks at least 60 terrorists already active in the Middle East who are learning to make and use improvised explosive devices. Likewise, the Kremlin ensured that with these actions, the United States is demonstrating that it has lost any moral principle in its obsession to bleed Russia dry. The European Union prepares new package of sanctions and economic restrictions against Russia. The European Bureau said it plans additional trade bans on imports into the EU of rubber, asphalt, vehicle exports, construction machinery, and more for the 10th sanction package to be discussed on February 15th. The bans will also extend to the export of electronic components that Russia could use to make weapons. As far as diamonds are concerned, it is not clear at this stage whether they will be included in the package. The European Union will also add 130 names to the list of Russian entities, military and officials installed in Ukraine. According to the same source, 4 Russian banks, among them Alpha Bank, are exposed to new financial sanctions. In Germany, the National Armed Forces began training Ukrainian soldiers on Monday to operate the Leopard II tanks. The training will take place mainly at the Armored Troops School in Munster, Lower Saxony, according to the German Defense Ministry. The authorities intended to complete these trainings in an accelerated manner in order to synchronize them with the delivery of tanks themselves. 14 units of the Leopard II A6 model is the number promised to Kiev by the German government, to which more German-made tanks could be added, which other European countries plan to supply. The conservative German party, Christian Democratic Union of Germany, on Sunday won the elections in the Chamber of Deputies of Berlin, snatching the leadership from the Social Democratic Party of Chancellor Olaf Scholz for the first time in 22 years. Data published by SAID showed that the CDU won 28.2% of the votes, the SPD 18.4%, the Greens 18.4%, the Left 12.2%, and the far-right Alternative for Germany 9.1%. Voter turnout was 63%. For RBB 24 Public Enterprise, the SPD suffered a historic electoral defeat, achieving its worst result since German unification in 1990, as the share of votes for Scholz's party in Berlin was almost halved. Since 2016, the governing coalition has consisted of 3 parties, SPD, the Greens, and the Left. Cyprus' former foreign minister Nikos Christodoulides has been elected president of the republic on Sunday, becoming at 49 the youngest leader of the divided Mediterranean island nation. The conservative Christodoulides won the second round of the presidential elections with 51.91% of the votes. Runoff rival independent candidate Andreas Mavroyiannis, who was supported by the main opposing political force, the Progressive Party of the Working People, obtained 48.09%. The president of Cyprus represents the Greek Cypriot community, which only controls 2/3 of the island, while the rest is run by the Turkish Cypriot side. The newly elected Christodoulides has spoken out strongly about the dispute that keeps the island divided. The island has been divided since a 1974 Turkish intervention triggered by a coup instigated by Greece's then ruling military junta. In Croatia, all medical unions have called for a protest at the seat of government on Saturday, February 18th, in view of what they consider to be an unsustainable situation in the public healthcare system, both for professionals and for patients. Natasha Van Toskic, president of the Association of Family Doctors, explained at a press conference that the present situation of public health care has been going on for years, but there have been no improvements and even less solutions. Mismanagement has caused a catastrophic lack of doctors in the system, and therefore the 5 unions calling the protest decided to act to protect the survival of Croatian public health care, the interests of patients, and the rights of doctors. Catholic clergy in Portugal have sexually abused at least 4,815 minors since 1950, according to results of a year-long independent inquiry announced on Monday, following accounts from hundreds of victims. Pedro Stresch, head of the commission, said the figure represents the absolute minimum number of victims of sexual abuse. As the inquiry revealed, most perpetrators, 77% of them, were priests, and most of the victims were boys aged 10 to 14, and they were abused in Catholic schools, churches, priests' homes, confessionals, among other locations. The Portuguese Catholic Church was rocked last year by cases of alleged cover-up of sexual abuse, including by bishops who remain active in church roles. The Commission said it was preparing a list of accused priests still working. We have come to the end of this news briefing. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For telesur English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.